I'll go to the Commissioner's lights here in just a second. I'm going to get Mr. Burr first. If you wouldn't mind, give us your name and address for the record, please.
Gene Burr, 3621 Maloney Road. Mr. Chairman, I just want to acknowledge an error in my own presentation out of respect for Mike Edwards and the Chamber. The discrepancy that had been pointed out to me between the degrees on a compass and the percentage of slope, which was pointed out to me, I jumped the gun, and it looked like it had been misrepresented in the Chamber ad. What was presented was accurate, and I thought, just as a matter of to begin this civil discourse that will lead up to the workshop, I should acknowledge that that was an error on my part. Appreciate your time, sir.
Sure, thank you. Yes, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Dan Evans, 8334 Richland Colony Road, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37923. I'm a realtor and a real estate investor and a part owner in a real estate company here in Knoxville, and been at it for several years. In the last few years have been pretty challenging in the real estate industry. And I just wanted to say, you know, from our perspective, please don't enact something that is going to deflate or hurt property values right now. We just can't handle it right now. I mean, it's not the right time for that. Maybe 3 years ago when this started, a little different mindset. I do believe that restrictions can be passed that don't necessarily hurt property values. The gentleman just before me said, no, this is gonna really help. You guys are, you know, you're the ones we've selected to make these decisions, and make sure that's right. You know, make sure that's right. And if not, 60 days from now is not going to be much better, really, with respect to that either. I have an engineering background. To me, 15% seems overreaching, and 63,000 parcels sounds like a lot of parcels. So, you know, please just do what you can for us. We're out there doing our best. It's a really tough time in real estate, and it's frustrating sometimes when our government can make things harder, whether that's federal or local. So I think that the economic impact in the short term definitely needs to be factored in. I mean, if it's to save lives and some of the things I've heard, I mean, obviously, but please don't forget us out there. We're trying to just get the bills paid. Thank you.
Yes, name and address for the record, please.
Polly Doka, 4804 Tomachi Drive. I've listened to both sides, and hopefully we can come to a compromise that actually improves development. If we have quality development in Knox County and Knoxville, we're going to have increased property value. The people downstream do matter. I lived in eastern Kentucky, and when I moved there, you could not walk across the river behind my house because it would be over your head. 2 years later, after strip mining, and I'm not comparing our development here to strip mining, but 2 years after I moved to this place, you could walk across the river and the water was up to your knees. But again, bad development does not increase our tax base. It does not increase our property value. And I don't mean to say that developers are kind of like the joke about lawyers, that 90% of them give the other 10% a bad name. However, you know, it's kind of like childbirth. When you have someone that has a really hard time, you hear all those stories. But when someone doesn't, you don't hear the stories. So you do hear the stories about the bad developers instead of the good developers. But the good developers should not have any problem looking at this plan and seeing what is good, and if necessary, if they need to add to it or change some of the percentages. I think we've had a lot of good input here with the MPC commissioners and MPC and the task force. So hopefully we can come to a compromise and make sure that all the development in Knox County and Knoxville is good development. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address us before I go to commissioners? Yes, sir. Your name and address for the record, please.
Dan Garrigan, P.O. Box 20084, Knoxville, Tennessee 37940. I spoke at your last workshop. I found out about this whole plan shortly before, I guess it was one of the final meetings that they had in Farragut, and spoke there too. And Commissioner Anders, I believe, had a good point, and that is if we're already doing all the things that this plan envisions, that why don't we just say, look, they've done $350,000 worth of work to look at what other places have done and how it's worked out for them. And, you know, basically, this is a good way to do it, and this is not a good way to do it. And they've collected a lot of good data. They have a lot of GIS capability now. You're already taking these site by site. And so if you created a best management practices plan rather than even if this is going to be hashed out further, which is going to cost more time and more money, then you're going to have another session where you're going to have to actually create the regulations. You're going to have to fight over the regulations. If you just said, we know what works, we know what doesn't, we know, a hill is too steep to build on, and a lot of the people who are the developers or whoever is here, you're not necessarily attacking their property rights. They will be dealt with by the MPC and by this body on a case-by-case basis. And then at least they'll know that they've had a fair hearing. If all these individuals that have no idea about what is going on with this plan, and I've read the plan, and I've spoken before the council, and I've spoken before you, and it really bothers me because everybody seems to think, and as this woman over here said, it's our lives. We've spent our lives working for this property. We pay our taxes. And now the government, who is supposed to be there to protect us, seems to be doing things that we don't understand, and we don't even understand what it may do to us 10 or 15 years down the road. But I think if you could create a set of best management practices plans and just said, look, you're not going to stick a house on a 60% slope or a 60-degree slope or whatever it is, unless you do these things. But you shouldn't have to tell people that what color their shingles are and what kind of plants they've got to put in, and all this kind of thing. And I believe that you would get a lot more support. You would not have to necessarily notify all the property owners because you're not doing anything differently than what you have been doing. And that is what really bothers me. And I am a landowner. I believe it will impact me. I'm not sure. But the thing that really bothered me when I heard about it at first was that the cavalier attitude was that the MPC and this body, nobody really takes into account that these ridges and hillside belong to 62,000 people. It doesn't belong to the whole community. I'm not going to get my life back if you tell me that my property above 50% is worthless. And that I think would be a good compromise. Let's just look at every individual case on a case-by-case basis, use the information that they have provided in this report to create a best management practices plan, and take everything on a case-by-case basis, and you wouldn't have the threat of lawsuits, because at least on an individual basis you could decide whether you wanted to take up a lawsuit. But if you're going to have to now generate some, you have the plan and you're going to have to generate regulations, you're going to have to fight over the regulations too. And that's going to be a whole other fight. And so I say, why not just codify, or not codify it, but make a best management practices plan out of the information they gathered and drive on it. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.